Sure. So one of the first titles that I used Wise on was a game called The Saboteur for Pandemic. And one of the things that I helped build for that game was a physics system, an explosion system that leveraged different material types throughout the game. And the depth of randomization necessary in order to sell a physics system, both from the impact of an object against the surface, as well as the debris, is a deep system that relies on tons of randomization, not just from the wave file level for rocks and wood and metal, but also the randomization of pitch and especially effective low-pass filtering. And so in addition to volume, you just have all of these different parameters that can be set, properties that modify the content and help extend it further, because as you are exploding and impacting against different surfaces, triggering different material wave files, you want not only the variations, but also all of the other properties to be dynamically or randomizing alongside of it. So the authoring of that is very intuitive. You have the ability to not only at the parent level make a decision about what the children will do in that relationship, but also for certain material types like rock debris, you can stretch that further or push it further with a pitch range very easily just by overriding the parent and pushing out the pitch further. That gives you the fine-tuning ability to get the most out of the content you put in there, and of course minimize the amount of wave content used, saving memory in your game. And we are in the next gen. It is a brave new world, but optimization is something that everyone needs to think about. The important things need to play, and we need the ability to fine-tune how much content goes into the game for each system. And the platform-specific nature of that, as well as the ability to enable and disable wave files within a container, just gives you all of that accessibility right at your fingertips.
A random container and Wise, and why would you use it?
Well, random containers are really important for game audio because often the same event is happening over and over when you're playing a video game. Like somebody will have an animation in Peggle 2, for example. There's a unicorn and sparkles pop out of his horn, and it happens pretty regularly. And I like to have a lot of variation on that sound. So in the random container, I can make 3 or 4 versions of that sound, or 5 or whatever I wanted to do, and it'll choose randomly which ones it can do. And beyond that, I can add some pitch variation in there, or any number of features to make it sound slightly different and not be boring and repetitive.
What would be an example? Talk about, specifically within Wise, how do you use, for example, like a random container or randomization of parameters?
So specifically, let me stir the conversation, or direct the conversation to session mode, because we use many, we almost use every single feature Wise has to offer in session mode. But specifically talking about random containers, so we actually made session mode is a place where you have AI musicians that are reacting to you, right? So those have to sound like real musicians, which means there's a lot of randomness that goes into the background. So every note that they play, there's actually like 3 or 4 or 5 different attacks on the note that are then blended into different sustain containers that are then blended into different release containers. So every time a MIDI file comes through and says, hey, I need you to play just this one note here, what it ends up doing is randomly grabbing one of those attacks, then randomly blending it into a sustain, and then again randomly blending it into a release, using a kind of nested system of random containers and blend containers.
So one good example for random containers for Outlast was on the voice design for Miles, having different states of the of his feedback. So the game was all about giving feedbacks to the player to make it very fearful.
So in our current game, Lichdom Battle Mage, we use randomization pretty heavily in audio kinetic. Spell sounds, things like that, whooshes, anything that is a repetitive sound that we hear often, we'll use not only a random container with multiple waves in it, but we'll also utilize the randomization of volume and pitch. Wise has a very easy to use, very natural sounding pitch randomization. How hard should I be selling like the yay Wise? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not used to that, so okay. Sorry.
It's like usually.
So I'll use the randomization of not only pitch and volume, but also you can randomize the actual wave files within the random container. So with just a few wave files, you end up with hundreds or thousands of variations on the sound, especially when you're layering sounds. So often, like for impacts, explosions, things like that, I'll have multiple layers to the sound, which are then randomized independently. So that creates this really kind of organic, constantly changing texture.
How, for example, do you use randomization? Whether it be a random container or a randomization parameter, to actually speak to a specific object or element.
In terms of, I guess, Saints Row 4, the majority of our impact system, be it metal, wood, concrete, or whatever material type that we had for the game, involves a random container of some nature. Be it a nested system within switches, but everything, our different variations on metal, wood, and sound, we're all nested in a random container object, all used within Wise.
So then, speaking a little bit about switches, you just mentioned some materials,
right.
Switches.
Yeah, they were pretty well, in terms of our material system, we had our core kind of a hierarchy of switches, which consisted of our high-level material, and then it would be metal, wood, and all of the discrete materials involved with those. And code side, the way we had our switches changed would be based on impact. An RTPC would change, and that would allow a specific switch to trigger the right material impact for us. So.